Thank you for coming this evening. The second meeting of the McKinney SAR chapter, February 16th of 2023.
Well, you do have a gap under there too, by the way. If you want something to bang on.
We got a wonderful program on Texas history. We got some awards for some teachers locally. And at this time, we'd like to have the invocation, and Don Babs will be doing that for us via Zoom. Please stand.
Are we ready for the invocation?
Yes, sir, we are.
All right. Almighty God, in whom we live and move and have our being, we humbly pray you will guide us and govern us by your Holy Spirit, that in the work of that and the activities of the Sherman Sons, of the McKinney chapter of the Sons of the American Revolution, that we may never forget you, but remember that we are ever walking in your sight through your Son, Jesus Christ. And now, Heavenly Father, we know you heal broken lives and bind up the wounds of your sorrowing people. I come this evening asking that you would look in tender compassion on our friend Terry Holden, whose joy has been turned into sadness at the loss of his wife, Carol. I pray, Father, that in the coming days ahead, you will comfort him with your eternal word, draw him closer to you. I ask that you fill his soul with the peace of your presence and grant him a vision of life where all sorrows and tears will be wiped away in the joys that you have prepared for him until the day breaks and the shadows flee away. All this I ask in the name of our Lord, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. If you please remain standing, and we'll have the Pledge of Allegiance. Tom Milson, and you please lead us down the next flag.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic one nation,
under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And also to the Texas flag, Peter Ford.
Yes, sir. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state under God, one and indivisible.
And also the pledge of the SAR philosophy. Lead that, please.
Of course.
We by the sacrifice of that of the United States of America, reaffirm our faith and principles of liberty and our constitutional republic until I declare ourselves to defend and against every foe.
Please be seated. And at this time, we'd like to have the self-introduction. Please turn to the left. Oh, not here, please. Okay, no, here.
Hello. Hello, my name is Kerry Barnett from Texas.
Bill Taylor from Frisco.
Grover Thurman from Frisco. Andy Wilson, VP of Awards from McKinney chapter.
Nathan White and Wanda White from McKinney.
I'm Sam Haynes from the University of Texas at Arlington, and I live in Dallas.
My name is John Bagwell. I guess I'm still a candidate. I've got on the application ready. Hopefully we can make the final connection and I'll be in the group. My name is John Bagwell. I'm a Vietnam veteran, Park Bronze Star, and excited to be here.
Hi, I'm Lee McCoy.
He's our sergeant at arms. You can let it have it.
I'm Laura Fitzgerald, and I'm from Frisco, Texas. It's my daughter Clarissa and my husband Brian.
You coming back?
Hi, I'm Wes Brown. It's my wife Amy. We're both in the colony.
Ross Reed, secretary. Online we have Bill Hurst and Don Babs.
Tom Wilson, VP of Programs in McKinney.
Peter Ford, I'm the treasurer of McKinney chapter.
Rich Bonaparte, my wife Lynn, registrar.
John Greer, I'm the Veterans Chairman. I'm live on the beautiful lake, Milwaukee.
Mark Hanson, I'm a resident of Fairview.
Mark Harris, president of Dallas chapter and a dual member within McKinney.
I'm Ted Wilson, dual member of also president of the Craig Austin Riley. War of 1812.
Is that going down?
Yeah, it's disappearing. It's cutting in and out.
I think it's okay if you talk right into it.
Okay.
I'm Bill Watts. I'm a dual member here at McKinney and Dallas and Plano and a bunch of others.
Ray Hargis, I'm first vice president of Edmonds Herald and Sherman and a dual member here. E.L. Holden, dual member from Sherman.
I'm Jim Akers. I'm president of the Denton chapter and dual member of McKinney. This is my wife Sandy. Everybody else?
Sure. Got one thing before I do that too. So I've got a question for everybody. I'm going to start it this way. This is a which back a little bit. Okay, we'll do it this way. Got it. Basically, this is which one's the true answer here? Okay, let's forget that. Okay. Okay, so this is about George Washington. Everybody remember him, I hope. Okay. Here it is. I want to know which one of these statements is a true statement. Did George Washington have one brown eye and one blue eye? Now think about all the portraits you've seen. Have you ever seen any portraits of him straight on or anything? Or did like a lot of the actors today, not that he was an actor at all, but a lot of actors today, did he have a double? I'll let you think about that for a moment or two. You know what I mean? A double, somebody that looks like. Everybody monitor. Okay, now guys, don't go search on your phones for this answer. I can see these phones coming up here. Don't do it. Like I said, if you talk with John Greer anytime in the last week, you're disqualified from doing this. Okay, answer number one. You think it was one brown eye and one blue eye? How many? Raise your hands. Oh, look at that. Okay, how about the other? You think he had a double? You guys talk. You talk to him. I know. Okay, and some of you guys are just scared to raise your hands, right?
That seems probably more likely.
Yeah. Yep, it is the second one. Okay, this comes courtesy of John Greer. Thank you, John, for bringing this to us. Are you going to give us one every month? Okay, good. So write that down. We'll hold him to it every month. He's going to bring us one of these little minutes. Okay, here's what John tells me about this. It says, it is said that everyone has a double. And George Washington, the father of our country, was no exception. His look-alike was Colonel, I think that's Elias Dayton of Chatham, New Jersey. That officer so closely resembled the general that even his closest friends had trouble telling the two apart from his back. The likeness especially fooled the redcoats, and several times Dayton drew their fire when they mistook him for Washington. In fact, he nearly escaped death this way during the Battle of Brandywine, Germantown, and Springfield. In each of those battles, Colonel Dayton's horse was shot from beneath him, and his coat was riddled with bullets. Did he survive the war, John? I was wondering. I don't know either. Okay. And John got this out of the Spring Sons of the American Revolution magazine, 1972. It was on page 21. Okay, so, and like to thank John for that, and now he's committed to bring one every month, so we'll see you every month, you're right. Okay, tonight, sort of a special occasion here. I would like to say that I planned this in advance, but I've already told too many people that I didn't plan this in advance, so I guess I can't take credit for that. So, anybody in here know what happened on March the 2nd, a long time ago? Texas independence. Okay. So for some of you non-Texans here that come in, maybe you don't know that, or maybe you do. But us true Texans, I'm teasing you guys. Anyway, basically like to fly the Texas flag on that day. So you may see people flying the flag on the flagpole on that day. Okay, so we're honored to have Dr. Sam W. Haynes here tonight. Dr. Haynes is a professor of history at the University of Texas at Arlington. He tells me he's been there forever, right? You never tell me how long forever was, but 93. Okay, been there for a long time, teaching history, and he basically, you told me you were teaching school. Was it in Houston? In Houston, and you got interested in the Texas history, and it went on from there. In your handout, sorry, your agenda, there basically the program. It basically is the name of the book he has. He'll talk to you a little bit about that he's written about the Texas Revolution, if you will. I think sounds like a good one, and I think he told me you can get them on Amazon if you want one, but we'll let him talk about that too in a minute. So, it's going to come up in fact in a minute. Okay, so without further ado, I'll turn it over to Dr. Haynes. See if we can make this thing go. Okay, see that looks about right. And you put me in this part, right? Which way am I going? That way. Yeah, so you did okay, this way too, right? Yeah, maybe. Yeah, you got it. Okay.
Hi, how's everyone doing?
Great.
Invited me. I'd like to thank Tom and Hayden for inviting me. This is the first time I've spoken to the Sons of the American Revolution.
All right.
Spoken to the Sons of the Republic of Texas and the Daughters of the Republic of Texas quite a bit. But it's my first time. That's gonna happen. There, I think that's better.
You guys
shove it in.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Where's
the bubble gum? We need some here.
Does that tighten that?
I think that's. I think that's it. Now, right now.
Okay, I won't touch it. I won't do anything. Okay. I do have a new book on Texas. Here it is, Unsettled Land from Revolution to Republic, Struggle for Texas. It came out a few months ago. And with basic books. It's not really what I'm going to talk about tonight, or I'm going to talk about a small part of it. But so let me briefly tell you what the book is about. Full disclosure. I'm just going to turn it this way.
That works.
How's that?
Whatever works for you.
You can hear me, right? Yeah. All right. Just full disclosure, I want to say something about the book, because I don't want anyone to go and buy the book and then say, oh, wow, this wasn't what I was looking for at all. I have been asked, and I'm still giving talks on the book itself. I'm speaking several places in the next couple of months, and have been since the book came out in May. The book, and when I do that, when I talk about the book, when I give a book talk, I usually start by saying, let me tell you what the book is not about. It's not about the Alamo, because I want to make that very, very clear. But I pitched the book to basic I said, look, I teach Texas history for a living. I have done for about 30 years. And even before that, because I was teaching at a school in Houston back in the 80s when I was getting my graduate degree. And so I've taught it for a long time. And one of the things that I have a problem with in the traditional narrative is that we just focus on a very, very small group of people. And so when I pitched the book to my publisher, I said, look, there's a lot going on here in Texas in 1835, 1836. It's not just a book about the Alamo. You have Native Americans, and you have this astonishingly diverse collection of Native Americans. Not just indigenous peoples, but people who've come in from the West and Northwest in the 1700s. The Comanches, the Apaches, the Wichita's who come down from Kansas. You have immigrant tribes, basically refugees from the United States, the Cherokees, the Chickasaws, and the Choctaws, the Shawnees and the Delawares. I could go on. All of these people are converging on Texas in the 1700s. And then in the 1800s, Cherokees, some of the immigrant tribes are later in the early 1800s. And then Anglos come, of course, and they bring enslaved people with them. But not just African Americans, even the enslaved population is more diverse than we think, because the price of cotton really skyrockets in the mid-30s. And so there's this really lively smuggling trade. So some of the people who are coming into Texas in the mid-30s have only recently endured the Middle Passage. They've been enslaved in West Africa, and they come to Cuba. They're bought by slave smugglers, and they're brought to the Brazos River Valley. And then, of course, you have this Mexican population, you know about it. And so the Anglo population is really only about half the population when the revolution breaks out, and considerably less in the years prior to that. Anglo-Texans only become a majority after the revolution's over. So I told my publisher, look, I want to tell this much more inclusive story. I want to bring all of these people in. And I want to talk about all of them. And they said, great, write that book. So I wrote it, sent it off to be edited, and I got an email from the art department just as it was being published. And they said, we've got a copy of your artwork. We hope you like it. And I opened the PDF. And to my horror, it was a picture of the Alamo with smoke rising. I immediately this is not going to do. It's false advertising, if nothing else. I want to make that really clear. The book's about 400 pages. I have about 4 pages. So they did change it. I shouldn't make fun of the art department at Basic because I really love what they came up with subsequently. So I'm going to talk about tonight, because it's the Sons of the American Revolution, I thought I would talk about something that I've been interested in for a long time, even before I wrote the book. My title is Heirs to a Revolution, the War for Texas Independence and the Sons of 1776. This doesn't get nearly enough attention. The connection between the American Revolution and the Texas Revolution. Everyone knows this, right?
Yeah.
Everyone has seen this.
Yep.
The common taken flag from which was created by some women at Gonzales just the night before the Battle of Gonzales on anybody? Anyone know? October 2nd, 1835. And this has become sort of an iconic symbol of Texas, as we know. Actually, where did they get this term, come and take it? It goes back many generations in history, but for the Anglo-Texans on the banks of the Guadalupe River, Gonzales, they knew that in 1778, in Georgia, a fort that was under siege by Lord Cornwallis issued the same statement of defiance to British troops. Their worldview, the worldview of Anglo-Texans, was very much shaped and informed by the American Revolution. So when you see the come and take it flag, don't think of it as uniquely Texan. It has roots in American history and the American Revolution. And while those women are making that flag, an itinerant Methodist preacher shows up. The Anglo-Texans have gathered on one side of the Guadalupe River. Mexican troops have arrived, they're on the other side. And he's trying to sort of rally them because they know that there's going to be a battle or a skirmish, there's going to be a conflict of some kind the following morning. And so here's the speech. I cut out some parts that I wanted to make clear. The same blood that animated the hearts of our ancestors, 76, still flows warm in our veins. Let us go into battle with the words of the immortal Patrick Henry, deeply impressed on our hearts. Give me liberty or give me death. William T. Smith, October 1830s. I'm sorry, it's 1835. That's the Declaration of Independence is March 2nd, 1836. Battle of Gonzales, the following morning is October 2nd, 1835. So William Smith, the men who gathered on the Guadalupe River, the women who are making this flag, the come and take it flag, they're very much, they understand that what they're doing is very similar to what their ancestors had done in 1776. And so what I want to do is talk a little bit about why that is, because, you know, 1776, we're now talking about 60 years since those events had taken place. They were still very much a part of the sort of cultural zeitgeist, sort of their worldview, if you will. Oops. Okay, I'm sorry. I've got two images here, and this is the one that you're looking at. In 1826, that's called the American Jubilee. This has attracted a tremendous amount of attention from historians. There's two books written on the celebration in 1826 that have come out recently. Lafayette arrives. He was Washington's aide de camp, of course, back in the 1770s. He's now a very old man, and he makes this tour of the United States. It's said that 1 million people see Lafayette during that year-long tour. The celebration goes on for months and months and months. There's 36 towns in America named after Lafayette, and scores of streets and so on. But it's not just Lafayette's tour. There is a monument building mania throughout the United States. The groundbreaking ceremony for the Bunker Hill Monument is in 1826. Daniel Webster speaks, but the monument isn't finished until years later. That is repeated in towns all across America. James Fenimore Cooper becomes famous in the 1820s. Now, you may think that Cooper is famous only for, you know, the leather stocking tales. We don't read those in. I had to read Last of the Mohicans in junior high, believe it or not. Cooper does not age well, I must say. So nobody reads him today. But if we know him at all, it's because we know Last of the Mohicans and stories like that. But he becomes famous in the 1820s, writing revolutionary war tales. Cooper capitalizes on this mania, this obsession with the American Revolution in the 1820s. That's where his career is born. We all know about Andrew Jackson, of course, right? Andrew Jackson runs for president in the late 20s, serves 2 terms. Actually, he ran in 1824 and was defeated very controversially. But we tend to forget that Andrew Jackson's persona was really wrapped up in the American Revolution. In the 1820s, he was the last of a generation. He had been a young boy during the American Revolution, but the story goes, I'm not sure if this is apocryphal or not, but it may have some basis, in fact. He fought back to a British officer who hit him with his saber. Again, he was a young boy, but this was really important to the American voting public. That Andrew Jackson was the last link to the American Revolution. And really, for my money, most importantly of all, is Patrick Henry. William Wirt writes a biography of Patrick Henry. It's published, I think, in 1818, if I'm not mistaken. It goes through 45 editions in the years that followed. Everybody knew who Patrick Henry was. William Wirt is the first historian to claim that Patrick Henry had given a very famous speech in the Virginia House of Burgesses, in which he said, give me liberty or give me death. Yeah, whether Patrick Henry said that or not is unclear. And a lot of historians don't think that he did, because Wirt was piecing that speech together based on eyewitness accounts. So who knows? But it doesn't matter, because that's what people believe. And liberty or death becomes sort of the watchwords of the Texas Revolution. Everybody, if you go back and you look at some of the letters that Sam Houston wrote, or Austin wrote, or Travis wrote, or Bowie wrote, they all signed them liberty or death. This is the Troutman flag. It was made in Georgia for the Georgia militia. It was some Georgia volunteers who went to Texas, and they would ultimately die at the Goliad massacre under Fannin. So the American Revolution just sort of infuses this revolution in ways that we really, I think, have lost sight. But they were very, very important in the 1830s. And if you want to know why it was so important, I think the reason is, if I had to sort of generalize, there was this sense in the 1820s, the 1830s, that the revolutionary spirit had been lost. And there was a lot of hand wringing, I think, from 1826 on. You know, was this generation of men worthy, worthy of the legacy that had been bequeathed to them by the Sons of 76? And this comes up in the literature over and over and over again. And so when the Texas Revolution breaks out, there's no question that Anglo-Texans see this as an opportunity to live up to that legacy. And it's not just Anglo-Texans, by the way, because throughout, I don't want to say throughout the United States, but certainly throughout the American South, where most of the volunteers came from, those volunteers very often joined up thinking, and having been told in these speeches when the troops gathered, when they were mustered into service in towns all throughout the Lower South, they were told over and over and over again that they were really performing the same duty that Lafayette had performed. Lafayette was a foreigner who had come to fight with the American colonists, and it was their obligation now to do the same thing, to volunteer and to go join with the colonists in Texas. And thousands did. Okay? Perhaps as many as 75% of the volunteers in the Texas Revolution were Americans who had just arrived. I'm distinguishing here between colonists who came with Austin and other impresarios, and the men who joined after they heard the news of the Battle of Gonzales. So when they heard that, they immediately formed regiments and marched off to the theater of war in Texas. Sometimes it took them a few weeks to get there, sometimes it took them a couple of months. Some actually arrived in a few days. Those Americans, about 75% of the men fighting in the Texas Revolution were in fact Americans who had only come to Texas after the shooting started. And I debated about whether I wanted to bore you with a lot of quotes. I won't, but I did put in a few here. it comes up again and again and again in the literature. Let us prove to the enemy that we are not unworthy descendants of Washington. That feeling, that is repeated over and over and over. That's Philip Dimmitt, who, as soon as the skirmish at Gonzales takes place, captures Fort Goliad. And then we'll, later on, we'll give up command to James Walker Fannin, and that's when the Goliad massacre takes place. But that's in October of 1835. In speech after speech, Anglo-Texans who learn of the conflict at Gonzales refer to it as their Lexington and Concord. John Soares Brooks, I spent a lot of time talking about him in my recent book, but he was a Virginian who had gone through a very young Virginian. He was in his 20s, gone through a variety of jobs, none of them particularly fulfilling, and was really not sure whether his life was going to have any meaning at all. It was something that really concerned him. And as soon as he heard of the revolution in Texas, he didn't tell his parents, he didn't tell his family. He got on a ship, and the next thing he knew, in January of 1836, there he was on Velasco Beach. His letters to his family are really poignant and heartrending, because he's trying to tell his father and his mother. He also writes a lot of letters to his sister. Here's what I have done. I want to find some meaning in my life, and if I can do that by living up to the legacy of our forefathers, then that's good enough for me. The letters are very, very optimistic in the early going. This is just as he's leaving. He winds up under James Walker Fannin's command at Goliad, and the letters become sadder and more poignant as time goes on. And it becomes quite clear that this is not going to go particularly well. And he does die in the Goliad massacre. But in every single one of those letters, there's these repeated references to the American Revolution and how what he's doing is in many ways analogous to what therefore his forefathers had done. There are so many other parallels here, and I won't bore you with them all, but the man who takes the news of the skirmish at Gonzales to the Anglo-Texan communities in the early days of October 1835 is a man named Matthew Caldwell, and he's known as the Paul Revere of the Texas Revolution. Back in the summer, about 4 months before the fighting started, Robert M. Williamson gave a speech in San Felipe, and it's the very first time he anyone in Texas advocates taking up arms against the New Mexican government. And he's known as the Patrick Henry of the Texas Revolution. And of course, we all know about Stephen F. Austin, who is, as soon as he dies in the fall of 1836, is immediately anointed the father of Texas, a la George Washington. And there again are so many people who sing his praises after his death, compare him to the American George Washington. There was this sense, I think, that Anglo-Texans wanted a father of their country, just as Washington had been the father of the United States. It's not a very apt comparison, I have to say. Austin was not a military leader. And if you know your Texas history, you'd say, well, wait a minute. What about the siege of Behar? And I would say, well, he was not a very successful military man. And he wasn't a very successful politician either. Austin's great contribution is as a colonist in the 1820s. As a leader of the Texas, as a leader of Anglo-Texans, I make the point in the book that he is sort of less and less important as time goes on. But that doesn't matter. Anglo-Texans are looking for parallels by attaching their cause to the American Revolution. they are giving their own revolution a sense of vindication. Interestingly, what happens almost immediately is that you find less and less references to the American Revolution or the American role in the Texas Revolution. As time goes on, Sam Houston, you may know, is the first elected president of the Texas Republic. And Sam Houston doesn't mention the American contribution in his inaugural address once, even though 75% of the volunteers have been American. A new narrative begins to emerge, and that narrative tends to stress sort of a ragtag band of colonists who are fighting against this indomitable foe, Santa Anna and his army. So the American contribution, the connection to the American Revolution, all of those things begin to sort of drift away in the public consciousness. And so it rarely came up in the years that followed. And I think that's one of the reasons why we don't think of it today. I will say one more thing, just if make it sort of bring this up to the current day. This has happened, people do this a lot. I mean, they look for a historical frame of reference. And I'm sure that most of us here can remember the 1990s. 1995 was the 50th anniversary of World War II, end of World War II. Tom Brokaw wrote a very famous book. Remember what that was called? The Greatest Generation. And the Greatest Generation, that name, that term became indelibly associated with my father's generation, people who had gone off and fought in World War II. Throughout the late 90s, historians like Stephen F. Ambrose became famous, writing books. He wrote, it was in the HBO series Band of Brothers. He wrote that series in the 90s, and it was turned into an HBO series in the early 2000s. World War II books had become something of a cottage industry in the late 1990s, early 2000s. Ben Affleck did a really horrible movie about Pearl Harbor in 2001. So this had all been sort of a cottage industry. It was all part of the national consciousness. And then suddenly 9/11 came. And after 9/11, Americans, just as Texans in 1836, Americans looked back to the World War II experience for guidance and for a frame of reference. Terms like Islamofascism entered our national consciousness, our national language. George Bush's speeches. I don't know, I assume a lot of you will remember this, the famous speech that he gave to the joint session of Congress in September 2001. And I can remember it vividly when I watched it live. He said, we shall not falter, we shall not fail, and I can't remember the rest. And it was a very, very moving speech, but it had been given before, not entirely. But David Frum, who was George Bush's speechwriter and who was given credit for writing that speech, said, yeah, I was cribbing whole passages from Winston Churchill's speech during the London Blitz. You've heard the term axis of evil. David Frum coined that term and makes it very clear in his autobiography that, yeah, he saw the axis of evil in 2001 as coterminous or analogous to the Axis powers in 1939. And so in so many ways, 2001, what happened in 9/11 was not shaped, our reaction wasn't necessarily shaped by the World War II experience, but it was certainly informed by it. And we don't think of that now. Just as when we think about the Texas Revolution, think about it as a standalone event, as something which has sort of no connection to the past. But I would urge you to think about Anglo-Texans in this way. There are Americans, whether they came after the shooting started or whether they came as colonists in Boston, they were Americans. They came to Texas as fully formed adults. And they thought of their experiences just as Americans would. And so the memory of 1776, spirit of 1776, that was something which had become really part of the national consciousness after the American Jubilee in 1826. And so they thought and they acted much as Americans would have. So there's really a very, very strong connection between the American Revolution and what happens 60 years later. Okay. How's that?
Very good.
Okay. Is that, I don't know when I came on, so I don't know.
It is perfect.
You know, I'm happy to.
Do we have questions?
Yeah.
It appears that Sam Houston, although he was elected, was not the first president of the republic.
He wasn't. David G. Burnett was.
Yeah, so did he get elected or appointed?
No, he's appointed. He was the interim president after the Declaration of Independence on March 2nd. The delegates in Washington on Brazos held a vote, and he was elected as the interim president, and Lorenzo de Zavala was elected as the interim vice president. And the first elections were held in September of 36, and that's when Houston was elected. So he is the first duly elected president of the republic. Yeah.
Not getting it for in some of research, how Sam Houston was part of the War of 1812. How he was on the Senate floor and got in a fight with another senator. Big jeebers out of this guy. His lawyer was Francis Scott Key.
Right. That was on the streets of Washington. It wasn't actually in the Capitol itself. William Stanhope, who was a congressman from Ohio, and he did beat him rather bad. And that was sure. And then shortly after that, I forgot when the Stanhope affair occurs, but I'm thinking it's 31 and 32. He shows up in Texas.
Yes. I like how you laid out how it was connected to the Revolutionary War. So a lot of people can say that the American Revolution, it was kind of a miracle that how we got our independence. Would you say was there any kind of miracle?
The Texas Revolution?
Well, yeah. Would you say that it was pretty much going to be inevitable Texas was going to gain its independence, or was it more?
I think it was inevitable. Yeah.
Okay.
And one of the big questions is, did Anglo Americans come to Texas thinking that they were going to break away from Mexico? My sense is they were thinking about it. I'm not really sure that they had an agenda. Sam Houston comes to Texas in 1832, having been told that there is a rebellion in the works. That's why he comes, because he sees Texas as kind of up for grabs. I don't think it's a conspiracy, and some people have alleged that there was this conspiracy between Houston and Jackson. I think that's pretty well discredited. But I think most Anglo-Americans saw the old Spanish Empire as sort of crumbling. Don't forget, you need to take a broader view. You can't just look at the events of 35 and 36. Spain, before it was the Mexican Republic, had lost West Florida to the United States. Then it lost the rest of Florida to the United States. Then it sold Mobile, Alabama to the United States. There was some question about whether Mexico really had control of Texas, because some people argue on very little evidence at all that Napoleon had sold Texas to the United States in 1803 with the Louisiana Purchase. Okay, so there was this sense that sort of this old Spanish Empire was crumbling. In addition to which, there had been, I want to call them filibusters. We use the term filibuster to describe long speeches in Congress now. But in the 19th century, a filibuster was somebody who led an illegal military expedition. And there were 3 of them in the Spanish period. And then there were 2 more in the Mexican period. And then finally, the 6th one is the Texas Revolution that you and I know. So there really was this sense that Anglo-Americans were going to move into this area, and it was eventually, sooner or later, going to become either independent or part of the United States.
Well, that leads to my second question then. Texas became a state just 10 years later.
Yeah.
Was there a push to just take a land grab right from the start, 1836, as soon as they get their independence, or?
Well, it turns out that Americans, although a lot of Americans supported the rebellion, they were a lot less keen to incorporate it as part of the Union. And the reason has to do with the anti-slavery movement in the Northeast. Okay, John Quincy Adams gives a very famous speech, and it was a filibuster, to use it in the modern sense of the term. He spoke for 21 days in Congress. I mean, he got bathroom breaks. I think it was like 9 to 5. I mean, he had the floor 21 days. It's an amazing story. John Quincy Adams is an amazing character. He felt so strongly that Texas was going to expand the slave empire, and he made it really sort of the cause of the last years of his life. There wasn't a lot of support for John Quincy Adams and the anti-slavery movement. The problem was that John Quincy Adams had made it a free speech issue. It was clearly now part of the public conversation. And so Andrew Jackson's successor, Martin Van Buren, who's president now at the time, said, we really don't need this. We don't need any trouble. We don't want to polarize the Democratic Party, which is what ultimately happened. And so that's why annexation is put off for 9, almost 10 years. And when the United States finally does annex Texas, it's the most controversial act Congress has ever taken since its inception. I mean, it is a remarkably controversial act, and you can argue that it's Texas annexation that leads ultimately to the Civil War. I'm really getting into the weeds, I'm sure.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
Not to be too far in the weeds again, I think with the story, and you address what McKinney seems to come out, that when Texas joined the Union, we now have the right as Texas to succeed from that.
Next class of tea. I know Rick Kirk said, but I don't know where he got it. So here's what happened. Here's the truth. Okay. Do you remember? Does anybody remember back in the 90s, the Republic of Texas, and they were way out in the Trans-Pecos region somewhere. Now, I had a student at the graduate level who he had all the literature. I'm not really sure where he got it, but he was much better informed on it than anybody else. I don't know if he was a member, but they argued that Texas could secede legally. And that's actually not true. What it comes from, the annexation resolution is in 1845. It is called the Brown Resolution. The Brown Resolution says, and this was passed by both houses of Congress, barely. The Brown Resolution says that Texas can subdivide into 5 additional states, so that Texas could ultimately be 6 states. And from that, somehow, people got the idea that it had the right, it retained the right to secede. That's not true. It had the right to subdivide. And somebody asked me, this was fairly recently, does it still have the right to subdivide itself? And I said, I don't know. I haven't thought about it. But I guess you would have to go back to the Constitution that it wrote after the Civil War, and surely that the Brown Resolution is no longer in effect. I don't know that to be a fact, but yeah, I can't imagine that they would keep that language. But that's where it comes from. It could have been 6 states.
We got a question here for one of our Zoom participants.
Oh, okay.
Does your book include Thomas Ingalls Smith?
No.
No.
Was that you, Bill, that asked that question? Bill Hurt.
Thomas,
Thomas Ingalls Smith.
I do not know him.
Bill on it?
Yeah, you needed.
Okay. Hey, Bill, unmute. Bill. Hello, Bill.
Okay, here I am.
Ah,
Okay,
Thomas Ingalls Smith was one of the two men Houston asked to remove the archives and bring them to him. Later, he was a negotiator with Indian treaties.
which was it? Okay, all right, so, the Archives War would have been in 1842. I did mention the Archives War, but no, I do not mention him by name. He was one of the people who was sent by Houston. For those of you who don't know what the Archives War is, a major embarrassment for Houston in the second term. Tried to take the archives back from Austin, where they were located, but Austin residents didn't want to give them up because they knew if the capital was moved, Austin would go back to what it was before, and that was, a white spot in the middle of the road, and they didn't want that to happen. So it was a major embarrassment of Houston's second. Sure. No, I don't mention it by name. Yeah.
Your title of your book is kind of interesting. That it says Texas was unsettled.
Okay.
Well, what do you think about Collin County today?
Oh, well, I'm sure it's very settled. I had a Native American historian on a faculty. He sort of balked at the title. And I said, look, the indigenous population of Texas is pretty small. I start my book in 1821. And I go up to state, okay, the annexation period. And in the early 1820s, the indigenous population is very, very small. I think it's much more accurate to think of Texas as a place of convergence, where all of these people are coming in the 1700s and in the early 1800s, from North America and beyond. What?
Still happening.
So it is still happening. But we think of, but that's where I got the time. I mean, I wanted to talk about sort of the chaos that follows, but it is, I think, largely unsettled. The cattle population would have been almost decimated by disease. You have Karankawas along the coast, but everybody else is from somewhere else. Okay, the Apaches, the Comanches, the Wichitas, the Poncawas, they had all come from other places. And all of the East Texas tribes had gotten there only a few years before Anglo-Americans, okay, from the lower south and from the Midwest. So think of it as a place of convergence, and then all hell breaks loose. And it's not just all hell breaks loose in 1835 and 36. One of the points of my book is all hell has broken loose before, and all hell continues to break loose in the years that follow. It really is, and I make the point in the book, and I guess this is an important point, or even remotely interested in what my book is about. You cannot think of the Texas Revolution in terms of what happened at something so narrowly defined as October 1835 to April 1836 with the Battle of San Jacinto. And that's how we've always constructed it. That's the Texas Revolution. If you want to think of the Texas Revolution, if you want to understand its revolutionary nature, then you have to take the narrative forward into the Republic period and find out what happens. Okay. When we look at the Russian Revolution, when we look at the French Revolution, we don't just have this very, very narrow time. We look at what follows, the kind of world that Anglo-Americans wanted to create when they, in Washington on the Brazos, created this new government. And so that's why it's so important when I wrote the book to go back to take that narrative into the Republic period. There was some question as to whether I was even gonna have time because I was on deadline. And I thought maybe I should just stop at San Jacinto. And I thought, no, I can't do that because we always stop at San Jacinto. And you need to understand what the revolution is really about. You can only understand that by looking at the Texas. That's one.
Okay.
Okay, very good. Thank you so much. So I'd like to give you a little something here, an appreciation for. Thank you very much. I've got just basically a certificate of appreciation from the McKinney chapter. I used that title there, but I think I've got it anyway, so. Yeah, I think we're gonna sit here. Thank you so much. Very interesting. Yep. Just pull it out, it'll squawk at us, we go into it. There you go. Okay. Yeah. You won't, we don't need any more.
See, the good sequel here, what the college and.
Are you talking about president?
Oh, you gotta watch this.
Okay, moving on to the announcements and old business. For announcements, the 2023 annual conference of the Texas Society is March the 30th through April the 2nd. And that's in Spring, Texas. And I know a lot of men have been there in the past. It'll be a wonderful event. So you can log on to their website to sign up for that. Our next meeting of the McKinney chapter is March the 16th. That'll be here, Spring Creek Barbecue. It's always on the third Thursday of each month. Also coming up, and on the back of your program, Thomas put this for us, the grave marking of James Lemon, March the 19th of 2023 at 3 p.m. And this is in Lancaster, Texas, which is south of Dallas. And I know at the last grave marking, unfortunately, I was not able to go to the one that most recently occurred, but there are a lot of people there. I think there are maybe 200 people or so.
Something like that. Yeah.
So hopefully this will be well attended as well. It's a fabulous thing. Yes, sir.
Yeah, we might try since Bob's not here.
I'm here.
Oh, Bob?
Yes.
Oh,
Excellent.
hey, well, you're up.
So Bob, you want to speak? Can you speak about this for just a second?
Sure. Yeah, there's the grave marking is, like you said, Sunday. I'm driving right now, so I don't have my papers in front of me. But yeah, and the I guess is going to be with the parking, and they had a meeting last night, and I was at another meeting. I couldn't attend that meeting, but yeah. So the plan is to go out there. If you can check the SAR Texas SAR website for the exact time, but I believe it was around 2 p.m. and then the ceremony I think starts around 3.
And your color guard will be there, am I correct in that?
Correct.
Bob? Okay, wonderful.
So, like,
Yes.
good. Let's see here. PL or
Can you hear me?
anybody else? Yeah. We're gonna send somebody else here. Do you have anything else to say much? No, I'm at TL. Anything else to say on the grave marking? You have nothing to say, okay. Where's the what's that?
It's gonna be,
There you go.
it's gonna be jointly done with the 18 Plus Society, the Southern American Public Protection, the Daughters of Public Protection. It's on the 19th, or 3. And last.
Lots of people.
A large crowd.
Bill may have some say. Oh, yes, Bill. So, right quick, while Bill's getting his seat.
Yeah.
While he's getting his seat, so from the people who are saying, now, what are they doing here? Okay, so one of the things we do is we find Revolutionary War patriots, okay, that are buried here in Texas. This guy on the back, so scroungy looking beard there. This guy is one of them. There was another one up in Bonham, Texas that we did in October of last year. And so we're sort of on that mission to basically find all of the ones that are here in Texas and mark the grave. That's what this is about. If you'd like to come, we'd love to have you. And Bill, would you like to say another 2 or 3 minutes more?
Yes, sir. The address is incorrect.
Oh, 624, eh? Okay.
And we were also asking for RSVPs, and no, I'm going to back. And the RSVP is Bill Watts, 1776. At gmail.com.
So what I would thought, if that's okay with you, what I thought I'd just send it out. I'll just take that latest. You tell me when you're finalized the thing that looks like this within that you sent me.
I sent it out.
Oh, you just sent it out to everybody in the Texas?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, cool. Okay, cool. Okay, well, I'll send. I don't think so.
They gave more changes.
Yeah.
Put in there, so this isn't final yet.
Okay, okay.
But,
Well, if you want me to, I'll be happy to send it out the whole chapter. Once you tell me it's good, and then they can respond into that. Okay.
Well, after I check my email tomorrow, I should know if that's the thing. But, we're gonna fold and share, we're comfortable shoes, this is an old student area. Where we're actually having our program, setting up our program. That used to be a burial ground. And because they don't know who's there, there's no mark. So they say they made them.
Right.
But the parking at the cemetery, where the old section, all the parking is going to be over on the other side of the road. And we have a fairly large place to park. And the way I'm looking at it, we can probably hold 100 cars here. So we're expecting probably 300 people. Well, we were thinking about 200 people, but now we've got the SAR, DAR, more of 1812, men and women, the SRT, the DRT, and the Pioneers of Texas. And I've invited all the city council, the whole city council, the mayor, and the city mayor of Lancaster. And I did that last Friday, and so far I've got 2 responses part of that.
Thanks, Bill.
Thanks, Bill.
One thing on the color guard, they have agreed to let us fire a musket.
All
They
right.
have agreed.
Yes, so
Wonderful.
color guard guys, bring your.
That's worth coming to see.
Well, I'll tell you, this is gonna be a lot bigger than Byron. And it's,
Oh, my-
I'm sad to say that because we did such a great job at Byron. And I don't think it's gonna be as good as Byron because the logistics.
Legit, yeah.
And the cemetery is where the gravesite is. It's like it's right here. This is the gravesite. And we're actually having the ceremony about 50 to 60 feet away. And there's trees and other graves between them. And we're gonna have to go through a little leading path to let the honor.
Sure.
The patriot. But logistically, we should have it laid out okay. When you come, it's gonna be tremendous.
Thanks, Bill.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
The next item of new business is Dr. Tom and Betty Lawrence, American History, and who wants to speak on that? You, Andy. Thank you.
So use the mic.
Yeah.
Is this one working?
I think so. I think it is now.
Testing. Yes, there we go. I think this is one of the best things this organization does. So I'm really thrilled that I get to have the honor of doing this. Stuff together. So we had some really great applicants. It was difficult to make a decision, but I'm happy to introduce you to our, first of all, our first place middle school teacher award. So this is the Dr. Tom and Betty Lawrence Outstanding American History Teacher Award. So George Wesley Brown was born and raised in Houston He described his upbringing as a home full of love and an example of what a father and husband should be. In 1988, he joined the Marine Corps Reserves, completed boot camp at MCRD San Diego, and then Camp Pendleton with the School of Entry 0311 Rifleman Training, before returning home and attending Texas Tech University. While at Tech, he met a cute redhead, and she happens to be in the audience today.
He's grinning too.
And sat next to him in Geography 101, perfect. One of those 300-person freshman level classes, they dated for several months, started considering a future together when Saddam Hussein invaded Kuwait. Wes volunteered, and in November of '91, he was assigned to the 2nd Tank's 4th TOWs, which is an anti-tank weapon. His unit saw action in a nameless wadi in the Kuwaiti desert, and later in the U.S. Agriculture Center outside of Kuwait City. Unfortunately, his unit had one loss, a close friend, J.D. Cricket Hawthorne. Cricket was an Abrams commander who was KIA on mop-up operations on February 27th of '91. After the war, he returned to Tech, eventually married Amy, and 32 years later, they have a growing family. The eldest son, George Wesley III, Trey, and his wife, Alexis. Their son, George Wesley IV, is it Ivan? Yeah. 6 months old. Happy grandfather and grandmotherhood. And their youngest son, Spencer. After graduating from Tech, he spent a number of years in corporate. He was not a fan, but the customer service training, in quotes, would come in handy years later. After a move to Miami for Amy's career and later Atlanta, where he taught and coached at a large private Christian school before MTV moved his family back to Texas with another promotion for Amy. Wes is currently in his 20th year of education and 10th in the Frisco ISD. Each stop, he has had the opportunity to, quote, infect his students with a love of history and a love for America. He teaches his kids that he often feels like he is stealing money from their parents. His idea of a great weekend is to have History Channel on one station and a football game on the other. And their parents are going to pay him to coach football and talk about the greatest country in the history of the world. Heck yeah, he can do that. Wes is a 2-time Teacher of the Year award winner who has served on multiple state education committees. Wes brought attention to the importance of Memorial Day when in 2012, his district at the time, Grand Prairie ISD, had scheduled a make-up snow day on Memorial Day. In response, Wes created a presentation detailing the importance and meaning of Memorial Day. His principal got word and asked to be presented to the entire school. Multiple local TV and print stations picked up the story. Districts no longer schedule snow makeup days on such an important holiday. Wes has also been asked to appear before the State Board of Education as an expert witness on TEKS and potential TEKS revisions. That's the Texas Essential Knowledge and Skills, which is the Texas curriculum. So please welcome George Brown, Wes Brown.
Thank you.
Our next award recipient is our high school teacher, Outstanding American History Teacher Award. Laura Fitzgerald grew up in Plano, graduated from Baylor University with a BA in history. To Baylor, didn't she? Okay, the other Christian school. We'll start a rivalry. Sorry about that. She began her teaching career in Plano, where she taught at Shepton and Plano West High Schools, World Geography and U.S. History. They moved to Austin, where she taught government and economics for 4 years. And in 2004, they moved back to the Metroplex, where she continued at Plano West for 2 years, teaching AP U.S. History. That's the advanced placement course. In 2006, she took a job at Centennial High School. Was that the first year it was open?
No, second or third.
It's pretty new then, yeah. She took a job there teaching AP US history and government, where she's been ever since. After teaching many different types of social studies classes, these are by far her favorite subject matter. In her personal life, she's been married to her husband, who is also a teacher and volleyball coach for almost 23 years. They have two amazing daughters, one of whom is here. One who's a junior at Lone Star in Frisco, and one who is in 8th grade at Stafford Middle School in Frisco. Both of her girls play school and club volleyball and are fortunate to have their dad as a coach for both club teams. So much of her free time, as you can imagine, she's either on the court watching them play or she's at the gym working out. So please welcome Laura Fitzgerald.
Again, on behalf of McKinney SAR, we'd like to thank both of y'all. I guess the older I get, I realize how important teachers are, and they really do shape our society. And if we don't have good teachers, our society will not function. And everybody, no matter how old you get, you can always remember the teachers that impacted your lives. So thank you so much. Also this evening, I'd like to call Tom up, our past president. I have some items for him.
Whoa. Yeah. Just make that, put that under something else. Oh, my goodness.
So Tom has served as our past president, as many of you all know, and he's served in many capacities over many years. Has done a great deal of work, and I know a lot of people here have been presidents of this chapter or other chapters and understand the amount of work that he's put in. So first we have this certificate for him as past president. Oh, cool. Thank you. McKinney SAR. Yeah. Additionally, he has a past president's pin. These are seen.
Oh, red bean, infamous.
And an SAR 125th medal.
Oh, thank you. Good. All right. Wow.
And in 1976, they had the 200-year bicentennial, and they made various coins. And this is a proof set of the dollar, the half dollar, and the quarter. It's a silver proof set from 1976.
Oh my goodness.
And one last item.
Running out of hands here.
Also in 1976, they made a special $2 bill, and it has on the back the Declaration of Independence at the same time.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you so much for your service in the past.
Thank you.
After he started his life when he got the back ribbon and he was the president, the second name he got.
So red.
Then he got the president.
I hear this, you know, somebody has to buy you a drink every time they see it or something. Was there something like that?
Yeah, get out of here.
Whoa, something like that. Anyway, I can't remember what it was. Something about you get something. If not, we'll make that up. Get started.
Next on our agenda are the January minutes. I know that they've been published right here on the website. Hopefully you all had a chance to review those. Does anybody have any comments or questions concerning the minutes for January? Do I have any we'd like to.
I'll make a motion.
Yes.
Accept them as written.
Right. So Tom has made the motion and Peter seconded. Any discussion? Vote on that at this time. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Passes, approved. Next, turning to the treasurer's report. Peter, for yours.
All right, here's the treasurer's report for tonight's meeting. So since our last meeting on January 19th, all outstanding checks cleared. At the time, the total available funds were $7,378.72. This month, we received $31.13 from Amazon Smile program. Current checking account balance is $7,409.85. Any questions? Excellent. That's it for me.
Recently, they've nationally started having audit committees concerning the finances. Our audit committee is comprised of Peter McClellan and Lodge Ruby. And Peter, can you address that please for us?
Yeah, Laz and I are gonna meet with Peter probably within the next month. And go ahead and take a look at the books and just make sure that everything is in order. As we expect it will be. And we'll give you a report next month.
Excellent.
Peter, quick question.
Yes.
I have the records electronic. Which would you prefer, or you can have both?
Well, I think we ought to look at both.
Excellent.
Additionally, Peter McClellan is our CAR liaison. And if you can give us an update on that.
Happy to do it. Many of you may not be aware, but there is a Children of the American Revolution chapter down in Plano, known as the Matthew Bolton Society, CAR. And I had the distinct honor of attending their last month's meeting, and they hold it on a Sunday afternoon at the Haggard Library in Plano. At last month's meeting, they had roughly 6 CAR members there and probably an equal number of parents. So there was a good 12 to 13 people present at this meeting. And it was interesting because they had a presentation on how to raise and maintain beehives. Now, I don't know what that has to do with the CAR, but it was a very interesting presentation. And it was given by a beekeeper who happens to reside up in Anna. And having had a negative experience with honeybees at our home about 2 or 3 years ago, we ended up where these bees built a hive between our first and second floor. And we had to get a beekeeper to come out and extract the beehive. Well, the beehive turned out to be about 4.5 feet long and about 18 inches wide. And the beekeeper came out and he said, well, this is going to be a problem. You have hardwood floors here, and I just don't want to mess with those. And I said, well, let us worry about that. But if we get somebody to cut out the hardwood, would you extract the bees? And he said, yes, I'd be happy to do that. So what they did is they came in, I hired a guy, he took out the floor, hardwood floor. The beekeeper drilled holes in the plywood under the hardwood floor and then smoked the bees, kind of make them very docile and non-threatening. And then he extracted the beehives. And unfortunately, we didn't get to taste any of the honey. But anyway, getting back to the program that was offered at the CAR meeting, it was very interesting and educational meeting. At that meeting, we presented our check, our donation to the Children of the American Revolution, which I understand has cleared. So they did deposit it. And the next meeting, they hold them on a monthly basis, will be in fact at the end of this month, in about a week. And I'll be attending that one as well. So that's my report, unless you have any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter.
Yes, sir.
Next would be our update on the Veterans Affairs. If John Greer could provide us that, please.
Coming up.
Okay.
The week of February 14th is considered to be National Salute to Hospitalized Veterans. Al Nelson, D.L. Hogan, Bill Hirsch, myself, and Bill Hirsch's lovely wife, Ruth Ann, were at the VA hospital in Monty, Veterans Day. Tom provided some Valentines, and Bob Johns from the Plano chapter had some children make homemade Valentines that we did. We set up a table outside the waiting room at the VA in bottom, and I didn't have to do anything because Tom was doing the coffee, and Rick Ann was doing the hanging out the goodies, and we just got to smile and talk. We were the first people that the VA has allowed that are not the veterans that are going in there for hospital uniforms to be able to do something. So we're hoping that we can start doing more this coming year. One of the things that I love to do, and y'all seen me do this, Theo, would you come up and help me? Not bad, Will. You come forward.
That's you, John. You said something, and you got something on your hat that triggered this.
Y'all know that we've done this quite a few times, and we love to do it. We are a commemorative partner with the 50th anniversary of the end of the Vietnam War, which will be 2025. And anybody that served from November 1st, 1955 to May 15th, 1975, no matter where you served, whatever branch you were in, you're eligible to receive a special Vietnam commemoration pin. We'll have it. You'll have it presented to you. And the Department of Defense. My favorite position. It's your service and Vietnam. Thank you very much for that service and welcome back.
So Richard, could you hurry up and get him in? It's okay. All right, work on.
We have any other business from the floor? Any other announcements?
Other than your first official meeting?
I had one thing, I have to think about that. So I think as some of you were, most of you are aware, we've been doing the Reach Across America for several years. And we just basically finished up the one this past December again, had great turnout. Everyone, we had great contributions. We basically were able to provide the wreaths at a small cemetery in Anna for basically two little cemeteries, but about 100 veterans that are up there. So we were excited about doing that. And turns out Reach Across America has a special program right after the time when they have the yearly event, when you can get more wreaths for the same amount of money. So I put out a call to anyone that was interested in doing that. Would you go ahead and go online? We have a website that's tied with Reach Across America to go out and do that with. Well, it turns out that basically we had that done. I checked the other day, and we've got basically we've committed to this cemetery association that we would do about 65 wreaths. Well, we've got over 60 wreaths right now purchased. So, and we haven't even, I mean, and that's not gonna happen till December the something. I can't remember the date.
Close.
So, but the point of it is when you do it now, you get a whole lot more wreaths for your money. So that's it. So I sent out messages today to the people who did contribute to those things, thanking them so much for their continued service to our support of the McKinney chapter and also the support of our veterans, both past and present. Just wanted to let everybody know we're well on the path now to do that again this year. And if y'all haven't done it, you don't have to buy the wreaths to come, but please, if you can, on that day, come out to the little ceremony. It's really great. We usually try to get some kids in there too, so it's an educational thing also. So think about that. The date's out there we can, and you can just get it on your calendar.
Thanks, Tom. Anybody else have anything from the floor? Is Don still with us?
Yes, I'm waiting.
Yes, sir. Don, if you could lead us to the benediction, please.
The prayer, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yes.
What, the prayer?
Yes.
Yeah, yes, sir.
Okay, yeah, you said benediction, you got me confused there. Okay, let's, all right. Unto God's gracious mercy and protection, we commit ourselves. The Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make his face to shine upon you and be gracious unto you. The Lord lift up the light of his countenance upon you and give you peace both now and forever. Amen.
All right, concerning the grave marking, I have Bill's email address. If anybody needs it after the meeting tonight, I'll hang around for a while. And now for the recessional, if you'll please join me with that. Until we meet again.
Let us remember our obligations to our forefathers, who gave us the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, an independent Supreme Court, and a nation of free men.
Thank you for coming. We're adjourned.